IVM.
Welcome to the Geek Fruit Podcast. My name is Dinkar, and with me today is my friend from space, Jishnu Guha. How do you do, Jishnu?
I'm fine. How are you?
I can't hear you because in space no one can hear you scream. Also, why is there an echo in your
That was
space
hardly
call?
a scream. That was very polite and very, cordial. But yes.
Okay, fine. You were being very cordial. I still don't understand why there's an echo, though. Your space is a cave.
I mean, you don't know what a vacuum sounds like. Have you been in one? You're just taking it on hearsay.
No. I can't hearsay because in
vacuum, in the words of Agent K, 1,000 years ago, we thought that the Earth was flat. We knew it was flat. That made so much sense. Imagine what we will know tomorrow.
Well, speaking of the Earth being flat, you are paraphrasing, sure, but the Earth being flat does also come up in the show we're discussing today, which is Space Force. I can't hear that name without saying it in the style of Space Ghost. Space Ghost! Who also, by the way, speaks in an echo. In space, it makes zero sense. But anyway, Space Force is the new sitcom, shall we say? Or comedic effort. Yeah, it's a strange one. It's, okay, it falls into that odd... It's definitely a funny show, but it's not a situational comedy as the term is classically... understood, because it's not a joke.
Does it officially call itself a sitcom?
I think it just calls itself a show. I don't know. But it's coming from the minds of Greg Daniels and Steve Carell, who have worked on, among other things, possibly the most beloved sitcom of our current times, The Office, and several others, of course. So the way this show came about is some guy, Donald Trump, is that what he's called? He's
Dolan.
Works in Donald. He works in the U.S. government in some capacity, I believe. So he set up a new division of the U.S. Army called Space Force, and this was maybe less than a year ago. And somehow the speed of this is astonishing to me. Netflix greenlit a show from Steve Carell and Greg Daniels that makes fun of that very concept and is set in the Space Force. So, just the fact that this is a real show already is astonishing to me.
Mm-hmm. Was it that fast? Was it actually only just under a year ago? It feels like his administration has taken a decade. Yeah.
It feels like it was a decade ago, but also it feels like it was relatively quick. I mean, that might also be because the last 3 months have essentially been one long day. So I don't know. But yeah, they just about got started with the actual Space Force right now, right? And at the same time, the show's launched. So at the least, they've matched the pace of the US military. So that's impressive.
But Netflix is as fast as the US. Netflix, if you weaponize Netflix, that's probably the greatest weapon that they could have, considering
pretty much
how much money and resources are behind that thing.
That's true. Just slightly less than the US military. Anyway, when I first heard of this show, already I was slightly skeptical. It just sounded like the oddest concept to me. Why would Greg Daniels and Steve Carell go out of their way to do something like this? It seems a little hurried. It doesn't seem like the strongest concept to start with. It sounds like a one-note joke that they decided to turn into an entire show. So I wasn't, right from the outset, I wasn't very sold on the concept. What about you, Jogs?
The contrary. I was excited because I thought it kind of was the same sort of one-note joke that most sitcoms are set within, which is here is name of family, or here is name of, place, or rather situation, I guess, like an office. And things happen in it. Now, there's no particular premise that you can, figure out for yourself as a viewer from just the name alone, which is kind of what most things are these days. Most things are given the title of the main protagonist. What the hell does that even mean? If you didn't know the story of Sully, what the hell is a Sully? So I was optimistic because it was the two of them, and yes, we all knew it was poking fun at Trump's new idea. But I was happy. I was excited to see what they would do with that, because everybody is very quick to jump on Trump's newest shitty idea and make fun of it, right? Like that's all that the news is full of. It's either telling you Trump's ideas or making fun of Trump's ideas. So I was pretty on board with the fact that these two guys who I trusted implicitly were taking a stab at it. And I'm definitely getting the feeling that I'm in the minority of people that really did quite like it. It's not perfect by any means, but I had a great time and I binged it within 48 hours pretty much. It's a very quick, easy watch. And overall, what stood out for me was the fact, like you said, yeah, it's not particularly haha sitcom funny. Nor is it terribly serious either. But there are some. I enjoyed the how do I put it? Like, it had a good amount of like stakes for very few characters. It's not a very well-rounded show. Definitely, it's not like a full-blown ensemble cast where we care deeply about everybody. But neither was, if we're going to keep using The Office as an example, neither was The Office when it first started. It took a while before like it developed legs and we all got to know everybody intimately well, and we got to know everybody's, neuroses and then figure how much we cared for each person. But in this case, at the moment, I really enjoyed Carell and Malkovich's little buddy cop duo thing that they had going. And then you said you haven't finished seeing it, right? You're on episode 9
have a
of
couple
10.
of episodes left.
Yeah.
Yes.
So you have seen the little mid-season moment with Malkovich's reveal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so I enjoyed like just enough of having those. Like, rather, they had just enough of those. There were not too many, so it's definitely not like a drama by any means. But I thought they did a decent juggling act. It wasn't as all over the place as I've seen people have been having problems with it being. For me, I was actually quite pleased with it overall.
I agree in part with you, I think, Jish. I liked it as well. And it's definitely not all over the place. But the way I've gauged the reaction to it so far, it feels more like people are disappointed more than saying that it's a bad show, which I understand. So to start with, yes, I just to add to your point of the fact that this is a one-note premise. It is a one-note joke in the title itself, which is kind of what surprises me. Because the thing with a typical sitcom, like say The Office or Parks and Recreation, is that they like the setting isn't the joke necessarily. They're just saying, hey, these people work in an office, and that's just creating a space where you can add your jokes and so on, and build a world. With Space Force, you've tried to turn the premise itself into a joke, so you fall into this situation of like, do I take these characters seriously? Am I on their side? Am I not on their side? Do I think they're dumb? Like, it kind of just sets up expectations in that way, which I think is the first issue that the show was dealing with. The second, of course, is that the creative team behind it has just done so much like great work over the past 10 years in particular, that expectations were really high for a like hilarious, I love this is the perfect comedy for the moment right from the start. Like Greg Daniels literally recently did the Parks and Rec reunion special, which as soon as people saw it were like, this is exactly what we needed. And I think everyone kind of came into Space Force hoping it would be that. And my issue with it is that while it's fine, it kind of doesn't seem very ambitious in what it wants to do. It doesn't set out going like, well, we're going to be this pitch perfect parody of the political moment. It doesn't set out going like, we're going to do jokes a minute and just make sure you laugh so much that the rest of your issues with the show are not important. It kind of doesn't do anything to its fullest potential. It just ticks a lot of boxes in a decent way. I think in a large part, the show still works because it's funny in parts and because of the cast more than anything else. But it's not quite where it can be. I also don't think that's a bad thing because, Greg Daniels in particular, his shows typically take time to get started. Like the first season or the first two seasons of The Office, the first two seasons of Parks and Rec, both not great, both quite literally okay. In fact, if anything, I would say they might not even be as good as his first season of Space Force. So I think as they figure out these characters better and how to treat them better, the show might get better. But let's get into a little more detail on this. We'll take a break right now and come back and talk about what we specifically liked and then why I think the show could be better and why you thought it was fine. Let's see what happens.
Okay.
Space Force!
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another week on the IVM Podcast Network. If you're not following us on social media, please do. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. I'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Paytm Money and Intel. We appreciate their support. It's been a fantastic week on the IVM network. I hope that you've been checking stuff out, but some of the highlights that you definitely should check out. Ashish Vidyarthi, host of Begin the Journey, was on Cyrus Says. They had a really fun conversation. I think you'll enjoy that. Uncle Please Sid did an episode around development, which was really, really fun. On Edges and Sledges, we had Adam Holyoke, former England captain. While those guys are killing it, one cricketer after the other. Definitely do check out Advertising is Dead. We talk about esports with some really guys who really know that space. Smile India, absolutely right. These guys are killing it as well. So is Pawan at Pragati. Don't forget The Original Things. Again, one of my favorite shows. You must check that out. It's just been a really fun week, folks. So I hope that you enjoy it. And with that, let's get you back to your show.
We are talking about Space Force. Now, as I was saying, I was slightly disappointed by it because, well, not even disappointed really, because I kind of felt going in that this wouldn't be as good as I was expecting it to be. But I do have some specific issues with it. Which we'll get into. But first, let's talk about the positives. What did you enjoy, Jogs? The cast, of course, is top-notch. What are some of your favorite moments or beats from the show?
So, like I said, Karel, Malkovich, Buddy Cop, Made in Heaven for me. I really, really enjoyed that, especially because, as expected, Karel kind of pulls out his usual tropic, I think now they're tropic, comedic moves, much in the vein of like how we've talked recently a lot about people like Jim Carrey, who are known for very specific type of humor. He delivered, as he always does, but I enjoyed the recontextualizing of it. I liked that he was not playing his usual kind of role, and Malkovich, who I don't know as well as I would like to, who I'm not as familiar as I would like to be familiar with, was a really pleasant juxtaposition to him in that I would have expected somebody more, I don't know, how do I put it? Malkovich's role seemed to be something that I would have expected somebody a little drier to be playing, like somebody that I can't really think at the moment like who would be a good substitute for him, but like the
somebody weird thing drier than what Malkovich is doing here.
Yes, and he did a great job with it, but Malkovich would not have been the person that I would have cast in my head for that role if you had written it for me on paper. You know what I mean? Right. But that's also me just not being terribly familiar with Malkovich. But basically, overall, yeah, the main characters in general I really enjoyed. The couple of side characters that I'm very excited to see where they take them further are Don Lake's Brad Gregory, right. I believe. Yeah. I'm really excited to see where that goes.
He's Donnie one of Newsom. The most overtly... Donnie Newsom is so good.
Fantastic at it. What are you saying about Brad?
Yeah. That he's one of the characters that's outright funny from the start. I think him and Ben Schwartz playing Tony are just like, they're the most clearly sitcom-y characters of the lot. Like they come in and instantly you're like, I get it. I'm laughing at the jokes. Donnie Newsom, on the other hand, is like a lot more of a straightforward role that starts to become funny as the show goes on. Even with Karel, he's kind of set up almost in this comedic way, but there's quite a bit of pathos to his role. The same case with, same with John Malkovich, which I was surprised by. So like that's why it's going for this like middle ground of sorts.
Right.
But yeah, that cast was great.
I think it's inevitable. I really wish you would have finished it because there is quite a big moment or a couple of moments in the season finale that I really would have loved to talk more about.
But, I do know that the twist ending is that they realized they were on Earth all along and they're on the beach next to the Statue of Liberty. That's true, right?
See, you cut out right there and I don't know what you said. So I'm just going to smile and nod, but you can't hear me smiling or nod. So
I was saying that
But my point is I really liked this season's frontrunners in the cast. And I am quite optimistic about where the secondary characters are going to end up, because again, it's these two guys in charge, Carell and Daniels, and I know that they know what they're doing. And so I really like, did you see the spy episode? Have you got to that part yet?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, there was a inquisition against a bunch of all the side characters, right? And so I loved that they had at least a moment where they were questioning Brad, who has just been nothing but a gag character, right? But that being said, there's got to be more to him, right? And the Lisa Kudrow backstory, I love that it's left completely unaddressed. That's bold and brave, and I love it. And she is a really, really good actor who they just kind of like said, you're waiting in the wings, we'll bring you on, and when we sub you on, you're really gonna take it home. And so I'm excited for the second season. I thought this was a strong first season. I think it's only going to get better.
And I think that the cast is just so stacked that I feel sure that as the seasons go on, I'm saying seasons, but let's see how long it goes on, they'll just start to figure out how to be funnier in the context of the show, and the writers will and creators will know how to make them funny in the context of the show. Like Jessica St. Clair, for example, who plays a civilian contractor of some sort who Steve Carell had a thing. Yeah. Ellie King, correct. Jimmy O Yang, even like Chris Gethard has a role that kind of progresses as the season goes on. He goes from like being a random janitor on the thing to someone more important. Like these are all just like really, really funny people who are all like legit comedians and creators in their own right. So I think as time goes on, I feel like the way this team works is they figure out how to use these people better. Like Parks and Rec wasn't funny outright, but as they figured out how to use their actors better, they just became a funnier show. And I expect that will happen to Space Force as well.
Right, like Chris Pratt wasn't supposed to be a mainstay at all, right? He was guest starring in the first season, and he was meant to be killed off or written off or something like that.
Yeah,
and then,
exactly.
Lo and behold. I think
not killed off, it's a sitcom, but
you never know. Who knows? I mean, he hurt himself all the time. He easily could have died.
That's true.
But no, I think in that fashion, I heard Jimmy Yang say that you've seen the episode where they face off against China. Have you got that yet? Yep. So there's a Chinese scientist on the other side that has a face off with Malkovich on the big screen. Jimmy O Yang's dad. Not an actor. His first acting gig ever. Literally just his dad.
Nice.
And he killed it. Yeah. So
do you think... sorry. I was just going to say, do you think that the way the show is being made kind of makes that typical approach of using the actors to punch up the show a little harder? Because this isn't like a Parks and Rec style sitcom where you have a writer's room that goes away, thinks of stuff, and then you come back and shoot the next episode. It feels like it's been made like a mini series or a movie.
It is.
It's like very specifically shot and directed. So maybe there's less scope. And I'm just trying. Like obviously we don't know how it was made. But I'm speculating about whether this process, like just the treatment of the show, is what's interfering with the typical creative energy that Greg Daniels and Steve Carell would bring.
Possibly. I kind of got the feeling that the first episode for sure, maybe the first 2 or 3 even, was so vastly different than what people were expecting, which is what I think most of the reviews are based on, the fact that like it starts off in such a non-sitcom-y, non-office at all kind of manner. But then you have episodes in the middle, like the, it's not Capture the Flag, what is it? The paintball episode, right? Where it's Space Force versus Air Force.
The War Games
episode, right? Which is such a sitcom-y type of thing, which is like, not your villain of the week, but kind of like here's our gag for the week that we're just going to base the entire episode around. That felt so out of place because they had already established that this show is not that kind of a show. This show is its own, slightly more serious in nature, slightly more dramatic in its execution, with reduction to production value and the way it's shot and everything. And I kind of got the feeling, this is just me, I think I got the feeling that at some point in the process, somebody at Netflix or somebody somewhere in some back room was like, whoa, what is this? I was expecting my, wholesome Steve Carell, Greg Daniels, office-y kind of stuff. And this show clearly didn't start off that way. So please give me at least 1 or 2 episodes which are pure just gags and very situational, for lack of a better word. And that's where that episode kind of came in and shone. And to your earlier point, I think you're right in that it's not like a Parks and Rec kind of writer's room. We kind of make it up as we go sort of a thing, but it is a lot more calculated, a lot more methodical, which is where, again, that season ending was really odd in so many ways, and I can't really say more about it. But sure. I'm really optimistic because I think that I'm happy to see these guys who have really proved their worth, clearly, without any question, have proved their worth, are now taking chances and trying something different. And I like that. I'm glad that they're not just, doing the same thing again, even though we know, like you said, with the Parks and Rec sort of reboot special that they had, how well that worked. We know that they could if they wanted to, but if they don't want to, then great, do something else, because they, they're more than just The Office, and they're more than just Parks and Rec and that kind of stuff. So,
if anything, I'd say, especially for Greg Daniels and Steve Carell, they've never really exhibited a desire to go back and do the safe stuff.
Right.
Like Steve Carell left The Office at its peak. He was like, I just want to do different stuff. And like he went and did some like really offbeat roles for his movies, right? He could have easily been like a comedic superstar, but he's done like fairly serious stuff. He's done stuff like Foxcatcher, where he's just like a nut job. Greg Daniels is also clearly going for something very different here. So let's take another break and discuss maybe what approach we'd like to see the show take. And also, I kind of want to compare the show to another similar show that came out recently called Avenue 5 after this break.
Namaskar, dear Bandhu. My name is Ashish Vidyarthi. These are truly challenging times, and in these times, we need hope. Do take time to listen to my podcast, Begin the Journey. Available on IVM Podcasts, website, app, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Remember, there is hope because there's one life and we are alive.
Welcome back. We are talking about Space Force. So, Jogs, just to, I'm curious, of these two approaches, this sort of slightly more cinematic, studied approach that Space Force went towards a couple of times, and the more sitcom-y classic approach that it also did in a few episodes, which did you prefer? Like, where do you think the show was doing better, firing on all cylinders types?
The prior, because the characters was still weird as all hell, which lends itself perfectly to the latter in the sitcom-y kind of setups. But I liked seeing them just presented, directed, and shot in a slightly more dramatic, high-stakes manner. Because at the end of the day, this is not about a company that's making paper, and God only knows how boring that is. But this is about a company that's trying something earth-shatteringly groundbreaking, right? So it needed something to like elevate it, no pun intended, beyond just a regular sitcom kind of thing. Because I thought that like if you try to put what they're doing, which is creating a whole new wing that's never been done before, and then there's obviously animosity from within the ranks, and then there's anxiety from investors, there's anxiety from people that are putting their life on the line for a brand new venture, and big giant elephant in the room, which I thought that they addressed really well with the POTUS being who he is, and everybody's anxious about what the hell that idiot is doing. If you presented all of this in a sitcom fashion, then it could work. It could be really funny for sure, but then it wouldn't have the stakes. And I think what makes it interesting for me is that I like the fact that it's completely uncharted territory for everybody involved, which, at some point, the rug will be pulled out from underneath them when we realize, oh, that's not what the real Space Force is really like, because there will be a real Space Force, and then we can go and poke holes at them. But I like the fact that because you're working in such a sandbox like this, where nobody has a goddamn clue what this really would look like, the character work that you can do with the lead actors, which they've done already really well, I would like to keep repeating myself. I think that that's something that really resonated strongly with me, and something that I would like to see them continue. So the prior, for sure. I was very happy with the dramatic side of things. Dramatic
sure.
Approach. You not so much?
I enjoyed the visual approach for sure, but I do think that it being a new way of working for a lot of these actors, it impeded the comedy in parts, I think, because especially with like a mockumentary kind of setup. It's not even a sitcom kind of setup. It's in a mockumentary kind of setup like they would do. You have a lot more freedom to just go like, here are 4 camera people. We're going to let our actors kind of let loose, try different things. And we're going to try and find the joke as they perform it. As opposed to here, where you go like, okay, we have exactly this shot. So we need to set up like a super wide angle camera right in front of Steve Carell's nose. And he has to deliver specifically this line. There's less room for the team to, for the actors to be funny on their own.
Right.
And I think that's okay. And I think it adds a much, like a very interesting layer to the show. But I think it'll take them some time to figure out how to bring that same energy to this kind of approach to making the show.
I mean, they tried to do both. They tried to do both by having, I think I know exactly what you're getting at. And I think it's that you're totally right in that, especially in the first act of the season, Carell is incredibly dramatic in the way he's presented as well. Like you said, with camera right up in his face, right up to his nose, and he has to deliver the one line and whatever. But then the B storylines of your Ben Schwartz and Jimmy Yangs and whatnot, like they were far more, you could tell like they were allowed to improv. Right? Like, because those were shot in a very traditional kind of like cameras in place, cool. It's not a mockumentary setup, but the cameras aren't doing very much. You're allowed to just jump up and down and do whatever you want. And then eventually get to the point where you say, okay, now I pass the baton to the next guy. But I think it's a balancing act, which you're right. They'll take some time to nail it. But I think when they do, and they will, I think it could have really strong legs.
I agree. Just finding the balance between the two, I suppose, is what they need to figure out. But what I definitely think they haven't gotten right is the political aspect of it, like you were saying. I find it odd that a show that's based on basically a very dumb idea from a very dumb world leader isn't going all in. Like, I find this, it feels like a bit of a having your cake and eating it too approach. So it's cool that they never address the president directly or like name any of his people, but just make fun of him indirectly. That's a good starting point. But then they extend that same approach to like everyone and then try and do this like, well, we think everyone is dumb kind of thing that I don't know if that makes sense because like, for example, there's a character who's a parody of Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, right? She's even got like a similar hyphenated name and everything. And I was just like, that's an odd satirical target for you to choose, especially if you're not going to be like really funny about it. Like they don't really they don't find anything funny to do with her character. They're just like, hey, look, this is like that other person in real life, right? And I was like, I would expect better from like really sharp minds like these guys. So I found that odd, like either go all in and make fun of everyone and be like really sharp with your stuff, or avoid it completely like you do with the Donald Trump question and just be like the super subtle, like we're saying a lot by not saying much kind of approach. And this middle ground seemed odd to me.
I'll give that to you. I'll totally give that to you. That did feel odd because it didn't occur to me immediately that's who that was. It took me like I think till the very end of the episode where I went like, wait a minute, is she? Oh, she is. Oh my god. So
and they do that with all the characters, by the way. Like there's a Nancy Pelosi type, there's a Chuck Schumer type.
They're all over the place, and it was not. You're right, not really addressed as much as it should be. But I think I'm hoping because this would make sense if it were true that eventually this show is not really going to be so much about the government organization and the what it means globally and the politics and all that whatnot, even though you have to start there, which for obvious reasons. But I think the fact that like they've kept Lisa Kudrow's backstory hush hush, and the way that this show particularly ends in this season, it's clearly going towards far more just about the character study of this guy, his wife, his daughter, and the friends that he makes along the way in a very high stakes environment. But unlike, say, like take The Office, like they never really talk about, or with Parks and Rec. Well, actually, maybe Parks and Rec is the best middle ground, but definitely with The Office, they don't tell you very much about the ins and outs of what they're actually doing on a day-to-day basis, even though you're there all the goddamn time. There's so many episodes, so many seasons. I couldn't tell you a single goddamn thing about Dunder Mifflin. But nobody cares because it's low stakes, right? Nobody ever cares about what goes into paper. But you're right, because we're talking about geopolitics and billions of dollars in space exploration and people dying because of decisions that somebody makes in some room somewhere, you should care more. But I think I'll put money on this show is going to start getting smaller in scale.
I would prefer that for sure, because I feel like they're not quite nailing the political parody aspect of it. And it feels like trying to, again, do a lot of things at once. So if they do go in this direction, I think it'll be a much better show for it. Mm-hmm. And it's also kind of going back to what they know they can do well, right? Like, if I had to pick a direction for the show, what I really enjoyed right from the start and whenever it came back was the little asides that would happen in the chief of staff room.
I love that. Oh my God.
That is
with
so
Diedrich
funny.
And Jane and everybody.
Yeah. And Patrick Warburton. Just a collection of the most awesome voices around, right?
So damn good.
And Steve Carell is trying to do this like gravelly, like gruff military commander thing. But when he talks to Diedrich Bader and Patrick Warburton, you're like, like Steve Carell's voice is just like, his voice is here, and Patrick Warburton is like, I don't think so. like 3 octaves low. It's damn funny. But yeah, like that's the tone I'd love for them to strike for this entire show, where it's both cinematic and like well built, but also just really off the cuff funny.
Yep.
And hopefully they can get there soon.
Yeah.
So that's the situation. Also, I really enjoyed one last shout out to the cast. Like literally everyone is great, but Diana Silvers, who plays Steve Carell's daughter,
not too bad.
Pretty good. She was in Booksmart as a minor character, and she was kind of like okay there. I think she's kind of really figuring out a very different tone from the rest of the show. Like she's almost coming of age teen drama-ish.
Yeah.
More so than sitcom.
Which, and I think it's gonna sort of what's the word? Not swan dive, but kind of like it's gonna merge with Carell's journey, like Carell, Kudrow, and her. Like clearly, like that's the emotional heart of everything. And each person's trying to figure out their own thing. She's coming of age. He's repressing old wartime trauma and stuff. And so like I think they're gonna have their coming together moment at some point soon, and that's gonna be tearjerkery kind of a thing. I want to say one last thing. Speaking of people, a cast that were great, but somebody that I kind of grew tired of, who I was surprised to see myself grow tired of, was Ben Schwartz.
Really?
Because he was doing the exact same thing consistently, and it never really went anywhere. Like, his character it's always a treat. He's always really good at what he does, and I have no complaints with that. But everybody else in the show at least like had some sort of end game towards the halfway point that you could see like, oh, they're deviating. I can see that something's happening here. I'm excited to see where this goes. But with him, he just had like a fleeting moment with some backstory that he has with American Apparel. And like he was fired from there. And like, okay, cool. Let's see where this goes. Like what's the chip on your shoulder. And I'm sure that they'll give him something. But I'd like to see it sooner rather than later with this new season, whenever it happens. Like, I want to see something like about the fact that, well, maybe he has no friends, and that's why he's so enamored with social media. He's like, I'm really bad with real people. I'm just really good with my phone. Something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes sense. He's really funny, but he doesn't have enough he doesn't have enough boundaries to make him funny in a particular direction. He's just like, he's firing all over the place.
Exactly.
I agree with you there.
Bull and China show. So fun to watch, but like doesn't actually do anything.
Exactly. And just to close out this show now, I will say I wanted to compare the show to Avenue 5 because it's got a similar pedigree. It's coming from a creator and a cast that has done a lot of stuff before. So Armando Iannucci, who did Veep, among other things, and Hugh Laurie, created a futuristic space drama where basically it's about this ship that a passenger tourist ship in space that gets due to an accident gets thrown off course and is now not going to return to Earth for like the next decade or so. So basically it's a bunch of people stuck in a ship on space.
You mean lost in space?
Well, one might say that. A Lost in Space sitcom, if you will. In fact, Jessica St. Clair is also in that show. As one of the passengers on the ship. And Josh Gad plays this like industry titan, a Branson type. Yeah. Now, that show is bad. It's outright bad.
Oh, is it? Oh, no.
Yeah, I was really disappointed because, I mean, it's freaking Hugh Laurie and Veep was one of the funniest shows of our generation, I think. So it's really astounding. Like, while Space Force has like redeeming qualities and like great moments, really funny in parts, and you can see that they need to just figure out where they're going to go. With Avenue 5, I was like, I don't know what the show is trying to do. It's not funny. It's not sharp. It's not witty. It's not serious. Most of the episodes, nothing really happens. It just feels like they wrote down a bunch of stuff and then they went and acted it out and then came back and went like, I guess our show is done. It doesn't feel like anything. And that was really disappointing to me. So I just want to say, if you want to see a show that's not good, watch Avenue 5. If you want to see a show that's promising, watch Space Force.
Okay. I had really high hopes for that.
I know. It's not great.
Wow.
It's Hugh, man. And Hugh's great, by the way. And there's like a lot of, like, they're all good. It's just, the show is a whole bunch of nothing. It's very Justice League in a way. That's damning with pretty damned praise as well. Yeah. But anyway, that's our episode for this week. Tell us what you thought of Space Force and Avenue 5 if you watched it. And if there's any other new shows we should check out, because I don't know, man. Space Force was like one of the new flagship guys that was scheduled to release now. And we're kind of back to watching old stuff again after this, I suppose.
Yeah, is anything on the horizon that you're excited about?
There's this vaccine that I hear great things about, so I'm excited about that, but we'll see when that drops. I believe they're working on the pilot right now. But tell us what you guys have been watching. This has been the Geek Fruit Podcast.
Beta, did you know 79% of all scientists in NASA are Indian only?
देखो, इंडिया में टैक्स सिर्फ मिडिल क्लास भरती है. Everyone is just enjoying free यार.
आजकल के youngsters are only interested in partying and enjoying. उनको देश की पड़ी ही नहीं है.
बेटा तुम बस शादी कर लो, उसके बाद तो you can enjoy life like anything.
I will tell you what this country needs. This country needs 15 years of dictatorship. That is the only way to become a superpower. See the Chinese, how much they've progressed.
सुनो, तुमने ये WhatsApp forward देखा?
So what's common between all of these statements?
They're all absolutely rubbish.
Fake WhatsApp forwards that spread like wildfire.
And statements that defy any logic.
We are here to debunk them all.
Way of family WhatsApp groups, worst nightmare. Where what happens when you read a book.
Basically, we're just a bunch of guys who want to cut through the bullshit of everyone saying this, how it won't be true.
So that the next time someone confidently squeezes out some WhatsApp or Twitter BS, you can look them dead in the eye and go, Uncle, please sit.
So join me, Joel.
And me, Tushar.
Every Mondays for a fresh new episode of Uncle, Please Sit.
Entertainment is like food for the brain. It's a window to culture and a great way to understand the world around us. The internet has changed what it means to be an entertainer, creating new storytellers with millions of fans. It has spawned a new breed, the story sellers, those behind the scenes creating the business for this ecosystem. They work with brands, platforms and channels who are keen to capitalize on an audience hungrier than ever for more stories. I'm Vineet Kanabar, and I have a ringside view to how stories are told and sold. On my show, I bring you creators, artists, executives, and marketers for a freewheeling conversation around the business of entertainment. Tune in to Storytellers and Story Sellers for personal stories, analysis, and criticism every Thursdays as I talk to the brightest minds telling or selling great stories today.